please join us and be seated to welcome the Lord to enjoy our prelude. Thank you. Please rise in the body or the spirit and join us for our in-gathering song, number 6, Just As Long As I Have Breath.
Welcome. As we begin, please turn off your electronic devices. I invite you to enjoy the chapel at the back of the sanctuary and note any joys and concerns in the book there. If you have little ones, we have a nursery downstairs, and we also broadcast the service on our closed circuit TV, which is located in the social hall near the nursery. By the way, I'm Lori Quigley. I'm president of the board of trustees here. I always forget something. That's why I forget number one this morning. After the service, I invite you to go downstairs, and I want to tell you why today. There's a couple of special things with it. As the service progresses, you're likely to notice the tantalizing smells of chili wafting up the stairs. And that's on purpose because today is our first Sunday potluck. And today's potluck is our annual chili cook-off. So there's lots of intriguing things bubbling away downstairs. So we invite everyone to go down and join us for chili and whatever else is there. Also, this is an exciting week at South Valley because this is the week of our annual auction. This is the biggest event of our year, and it's a fundraiser that helps us fulfill our mission and do all the wonderful programs that we do here. It's a wonderful party, so if you don't know what the auction is, please come downstairs and talk to people at the auction table, and they'll help you get signed up. And if you do want to know what it is, I hope you have your tickets and you're ready to go. Lots of fun things have been donated, and it's going to be a fun time. So now let's proceed with our traditional greeting. Come, come, whoever you are. You are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears. You are welcome here. If you come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome.
Good morning. My name is Reverend John Cooper. Some of you know me, have known me for many years. As a member of this community, I am not your usual pastor. I guess not the usual suspect. I'm an affiliate minister here at South Valley. My full-time ministry is as a chaplain at the Huntsman Cancer Hospital at the University of Utah. And this congregation recognizes and supports that ministry. So at times I have the good fortune to be here in front of you and speak with you all. And I want to share with you this morning as we start our service some words from our hymnal. I welcome you to read along, but we're not going to do this as a responsive reading. All right? But it is listed in your order of service. Number 660. So you're welcome to take a look. You can see what I paraphrased and changed. These words were penned by Henry David Thoreau. He wrote, "I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. I wish to learn what life has to teach and not. And when I come to die, discover that I have not lived. I wish to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. If life proves to be mean, then to get to the whole genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world. Or, if it is sublime, to know it by experience, and to be able to give a true account of it." And this morning, I encourage you to reflect on what it means to make deliberate choices in life, to live deliberately, even in the face of meanness, and even in the face of loss. To be deliberate both in the ways we celebrate and in the ways we struggle. Now we have our chalice lighting. All please rise in body or spirit.
And I've asked Leo Terrace to come light the chalice.
let's have anyone who would like to hear a story come on up front and find a good spot to sit. Oh my gosh, that hat is awesome. I need that hat. And that hat goes along really well with our story today, you'll see. It is a good spot to sit. Okay, let's sit down. Thank you. Alrighty. So today's story is called The Dead Tree. Okay? You're going to see. Okay, I'd like you to stop distracting others. Thank you. Alright. So it stood tall in the forest. For 100 years or more, the oak had grown and spread its shade. Birds nested in its shelter. Squirrels made their homes in ragged bundles of sticks and leaves. It grew really big over all those years. Yeah. And in the fall, they garnered their winter food from the rich rain of acorns that fell from the tree. Acorns, just like your hat. They do. Tucked under its gnarled roots, small creatures found safety from fox and owl. Slowly, me too. Slowly, over the years, the forest soil increased as the brown, leathery leaves, shaken down by the autumn winds, moldered under the snow. So all those leaves turning into soil. But even as the tree grew, life gnawed at its heart. Carpenter ants tunneled through the strength of the oak. Termites ate out passageways in wondrous patterns. A broken limb let the dusty spores of a fungus enter the heartwood of the tree, and a rot spread inside the healthy bark. Year by year, the tree grew weaker as its enemies worked. Each spring, fewer and fewer leaves unfolded, and its great reaching branches turned gray with death. Woodpeckers peppered the limbs with holes, looking for the tasty grubs and beetles that had tunneled the wood. And here and there, they dug bigger holes to hold their babies. In winter storms, one by one, the great branches broke and crashed to the floor of the forest until there remained only the proud trunk holding its broken arms up to the sky. Now it was the autumn weather, and it was long and lazy, yellow and gray and misty mornings, middays filled with false summer warmth, and the nights pierced with frost, just like now, right? The cruel days of winter followed. A family of deer mice settled into a hole that had once held an arching branch. A rabbit found protection from the biting wind in the rotted center of the old trunk. And the ants and termites, the dormant grubs and silent fungus waited out the winter weather under the bark and deep in the wood. You see all the little critters living in the dead tree? In the spring, the young sun warmed the forest floor, and acorns sprouted to replace the fallen giant. Now new life was taking over the dead tree. Old woodpecker holes made snug homes for chipmunks. The hollow center of the trunk sheltered a family of raccoons, while beneath the bark spread the worm-eating fungus, ghost white and sulfur yellow. And deep inside, the carpenter ants and the termites continued their digging and eating. You guys ever seen a really old dead tree falling apart like this, slowly decaying? On the underside where the trunk lay half buried in the damp and musty leaf loam, the mosses stitched a green carpet, softer than the softest wool. Fragile ferns clustered in its shadow, mushrooms popped up out of the decaying mold, and scarlet clumps of British soldiers sprinkled the loosening bark. It's kind of lichen. You guys ever seen lichen growing on dead wood or on stones, right? The years passed and the oak hardwood grew soft and punky, like when it could break apart in your hands. It crawled with 100,000 grubs and beetles, centipedes with their scrambling, scurrying legs, snails and slugs all fed on the rotting wood, and earthworms made their way through the feast, helping to turn the tree once more into earth. Pale shell fungus clung to the sides like clusters of giant clamshells, eaten away and growing as the tree decayed. A skunk came waddling by with her string of babies. Sniffing at the wood, she ripped into its softness with her claws to uncover the scrabbling life inside, and eagerly the family feasted. Secretive forest birds scratched and picked for grubs and worms, pulling the tree apart, bit by bit, while the melting winter snows and soft spring rains hastened the rotting of the wood. And in this way, as new trees grew in strength from acorns that had fallen long years ago, the great oak returned to the earth. On the ground, there remained only a brown ghost of Richard Loam, where the proud tree had come to rest. So the tree went back to the forest, right? And that is our story of the dead tree that had all sorts of life inside it. Thank you so much.
Please join me now in an attitude of meditation and of prayer. I'm struck this morning by the words that we sing every morning as the children go downstairs every Sunday morning. Go now in peace. Go now in peace. Because I looked at the news this morning in preparation for this prayer, and I found more shootings, more pain. The Utah Mayor, Brent Taylor, lost his life overseas while serving with the Utah National Guard. And there's been an accident involving Girl Scouts and another shooting at a yoga studio. And the losses of this own community, the loss of John Carrillo, and John Hero, and others haunt me this time. And so I ask for your centering and your prayers for all of those among us who have lost, and for all of those in the larger world who are finding new losses today. Take that prayer of go now in peace that we sing in hopes for our children every Sunday morning and send it out. We need more peace. We need more compassion. Source of all, whatever it is that is out there with us, we ask that you hear our hopes and our wishes. We ask that you spread them to the world around us. Let us take a moment of reflection. Please remain seated, but open your hymnals to Spirit of Life, number 123. Join us in singing our song of reflection.
It is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offerings with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For November and December, the offering will be split with the Rape Recovery Project. The Rape Recovery Center is a trusted community provider of direct services and primary prevention education in Utah. If you will join me, please, in saying the words printed in the order of service for our offering. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
David, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that music with us. That was beautiful. Good morning again, gentle people. Today, I think I want to talk about what happens when we die. Most of you know that my own father died in April of this year. His life was ended by a disease he got being in downtown Manhattan during the hours following the fall of the Twin Towers. His lungs were injured by the building materials. He was in his 70s, but besides his lungs, his ability to breathe, his doctors told me he was in perfect health. He would have lived for years without that specific disease. And so recently I went back to Holbrook, Connecticut, to the small town where my ancestors ran the family store and the post office. And on October 20th, we did my father's memorial in the small congregational church that's at the town center that's about 50 feet from the door of the house he grew up in. The pastor there was incredibly generous and just shared his pulpit with me without any presence in it at all, just let me lead the service. And besides my own losses this year, there have been painful losses in this community. There are those among us who are in deep grief. And there have also been and continue to be horrible losses in the larger world. And I know that many of you gentle people feel those losses deeply as well. There has just been a lot of death this year. And I find myself wondering, maybe even longing to know where all these beloved dead go when they are no longer here with us. When I visit with people in the hospital and their loved ones are dying, I have learned that those who have strong beliefs about the afterlife also seem to find a strong sense of comfort in those beliefs about where their loved one is going or has gone. Unfortunately, I cannot share the same certainty. And so I find in the time following a loss, when I am missing the person that I loved, I'm still trying to figure out, how do I relate to them? Where do I locate them? I mean, I know they're not exactly here anymore, but still they are with me somehow. I mean, I can still feel them. Maybe the feeling's more of an ache, a longing, but it's there. I just can't seem to find them quite as easily anymore. When I was young, my father shared an interesting story, or an interesting exchange with me. Maybe not exactly appropriate, age appropriate for me. You decide. I was about 11 or 12. We were riding in a car together. And my father turned to me and said, "John, do you ever feel like there's another place?" "Well, yeah, Dad, there's another place. We're going to another place right now in the car." I was like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean another place, like right next to this one. What my father didn't know at the time is that from earliest childhood, I remember sitting and talking with trees and rocks and brooks and having them talk back. And I was pretty sure other people didn't hear what they said, because other people didn't seem to hear what they said, and it seemed to bother them when I did. So I said, "Yeah, Dad, I think there's another place." "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, John, sometimes I just feel like I could just go there, other place. And I just want you to know, if I'm ever not here with you, I'm just over there." As you can imagine, my reaction to this story was perhaps not what my father had anticipated. Like I said, I think I was 11 or 12, right? But it did set up a conversation for the rest of our lives about spiritual matters. My father was a very spiritual man. And when he decided that he wasn't going to pursue a lung transplant anymore, he didn't decide it was okay to die. Instead, he just decided, well, Western medicine, this transplant thing, that sounds crazy, so I'm going to do this other thing and let somebody younger than me get a lung whose body probably can survive it better. And so instead, he convened a spiritual council. My father was a meditator. He meditated every day for probably the last 20, 30 years of his life. And so he convened this spiritual council that consisted of some other spiritual teachers he'd studied with, some of whom were still with us here on this earth, and who were agreeing, yes, I will join you in this council with David Cooper. And then when he was surprised at the first meeting when his mom showed up, wanting to also help. She'd been dead for quite some time, and so he was a little surprised to find her on his council, but he said, I figured Mom wants to help me, okay. All right. And so every day, we'd talk, and I'd be like, Dad, did you go to, he didn't like the word soul. It bothered him. He'd always correct me to spirit over his soul, right? Soul just didn't resonate somehow, so I always have a little fun with him and be like, Dad, did your soul go to council today? Spirit, yes it did. But, there came a time one day where he woke up from council. And the council was convened to heal, quote unquote, his illness. And that word heal is different than the word treat or cure. Because heal, in medical understanding of literature and in psychology, means to bring to wholeness. Whereas cure means to end the ramifications of the symptoms of the disease. My father's council was convened as a healing council, not a curing council. And the inevitable day came where he woke with the phrase, the work is done, on his lips. And it was about that time that he started taking a turn significantly, and it was within a week or two that he was in hospice, and he was gone. And now that he's gone, and I want to keep calling him, I want to keep picking up the phone and calling him and chatting with him, and I realized how much he was in my life, and how much it hurts to be unable to make that phone call. And just thinking about that makes me want to recognize, and watching the news this week and watching the news today, I just want to recognize the hurt that we have all felt in those losses that we have to deal with. And the compassion we feel when those we love, the community around us, feel a horrible loss, face a horrible loss. And the hurt we feel looking at the suffering of others in the public eye, knowing that their losses must be something like ours. And this morning, I find that I want to uplift you, comfort you in some way. I want to find the right things to say, to touch your hearts and maybe inspire you. Certainly I want to offer comfort, maybe some restoration, in the midst of what I imagine could be an exhaustion of loss. I like that phrase, an exhaustion of loss. I know that between my own losses and the losses of those I love and have known, and the losses I read about every day, I feel an exhaustion. I felt it again when I opened the news this morning and looked at what is waiting out there for us to learn about that has happened today. And I find I want to say words that will rejuvenate or comfort if you share that feeling of exhaustion. And I have to be honest that I truthfully do not know if I know how to do that. I thought maybe if I told you what I'm hoping to do, maybe it'll help me do it. At least it seemed worth a try. And I welcome you to share with me afterwards how that turned out for you. I'm obviously going to know how it turned out for me, but I welcome you to share with me how it turned out for you. This past week, after the horrible shooting at Tree of Life Synagogue, October 27th, during morning services, I believe by now everyone probably knows about this. I went to a vigil at a congregation called Omni Tuesday evening, and I went with a heavy heart. Not just over the loss itself, but I went with a heavy heart because I had been so focused and embedded in my own loss, in my own story, that at first I did not see the news. I was ignorant of the pain. It was only when a hospital colleague who's Jewish asked me if I would attend the vigil, asked the chaplain she works with if I would attend the vigil. And there was something going on for her that wasn't going on for me, and I knew that I had missed something important, really important. And so after my coworker asked me if I would go to this vigil for Dutch Unity, and I said I certainly tried to. I gave the best response that I could in the moment. I left the conversation and I went immediately to the hallway, found my cell phone, and immediately figured out what it was that I had missed, and was awestruck and floored. And I had to return to the person and apologize for not having felt the events as deeply or intently as I felt like I should have. And sometimes I think our lives are like that. We just get so full of our own thoughts, we have limited room for more. Logotherapy psychologist Viktor Frankl, a favorite of mine, who's a World War II survivor of many hours of suffering, is quoted as saying, "Suffering fills the vessel completely." And I know that is how I felt. After presiding over my own father's memorial, touching on all these moments from our life together, I felt so full of my own suffering that I missed bearing witness to a deeply painful and important world and life event. I admit to some horror when I realized that every day in this world, things are happening, painful things are happening so often that it feels like if I look away for even a moment, I might fail to bear witness to some important human suffering. And when you decide to become a chaplain, bearing witness to human suffering is kind of a thing. And so I find it horrifying that I miss those things, and exhausting that I can miss them in just an instant. And there's a question that comes up for me too. How much can I take? At what point does watching human suffering become more than I can bear? And how do I take care of myself when I know I don't want to look away? Especially when I have to carry my own losses that fill my vessel so completely. How do I make room for more when I want? These are really important questions. They're important to me this year. They're important because of my own personal burdens, and I think maybe important questions to others in this community too. Who I wonder if maybe they're too struggling with the full vessel. And so there I was, a congregation called on me, going because a colleague at work had let me know that this vigil was important to them, and going because as soon as I understood, it became important to me. And I felt a need to engage, support, and to share. And I'll be truthful, after doing an entire day, as a chaplain in a cancer center, going and sharing more suffering is not the first to-do item on my list at the end of the evening. My wife just laughed, right? Because the first to-do item on the end of my list is to do something that helps me forget the day that I just had. But when I arrived, I found what looked like a few hundred people come to show support and to share human suffering. And as I walked up, I saw other clergy there. Our own Reverend Bob Lavalier was there. And the UU ministers from church, from First Church, Reverend Tom Goldsmith and Reverend Monica Dawkins were there. I listened to wise words from the new rabbi a congregation called me, Rabbi Samuel Spector. This guy's great. He's in his young 30s, he's energetic, he's inspired and enthused. And Rabbi Spector said, among other things, something to the effect of, or at least this is what I heard, my memory is far from perfect, so I would be happy to tell you how many times the story has come out differently. And Rabbi Spector said that the people of the Jewish faith do not have details about what happens after we die. He said their faith is ambiguous about such things. But what they do have is a clear idea of a world to come. A clear image of a world with a promise of being better. A world with more justice, more compassion, and more love. So we hold on to those we have loved and we have lost. In relation to that world to come, we mourn them and grieve the loss. And we express value in their sacrifices by continuing to work towards that world. At least that was most of what I heard in his words. I'm sure there were quite a bit more wisdom, but that's what I connected with. And in thinking about this sermon, which I aptly titled Reflections on Love and Loss before I had any idea what I was going to speak about, something in those words has been rumbling around inside me. Something about being in that shared space and listening to those words touched me in a way that shifted my own vessel for suffering. I walked away feeling different. Though I'm not sure I understand fully what happened. And so I thought maybe I would look more deeply into traditions of mourning in the Jewish faith. The Jewish people are a people who have had to bear the burdens of their own individual losses while also facing unimaginable communal and public loss. And they have practiced doing so for several thousand years now. The Jewish communal sense of loss stretches back into the early history of civilization. And so I thought maybe I could learn something from these resilient and still hopeful and beautiful people. In the Jewish tradition, there is a structured method of mourning. A longer heritage that has helped teach Jewish people what they may need when they need to mourn. And here I recognize perhaps a moment of irony in this, and this may seem strange to Unitarian Universalists, to have a structured tradition like this, passed down generation to generation, when we are people who, out of our own losses in our history, in our relationships, at times we must spend a lot of energy and focus figuring out how to leave behind traditions that were handed down generation to generation, right? And so it may seem a little ironic to look at a tradition where that is central. But still, maybe we can learn something about the ritual, long-standing traditions that the Jewish people hold around the mourning. And let me share something about ritual, too. Human beings have relied on ritual since our earliest communities as a way of sharing meaning and finding a place for things that are important. In fact, the anthropological, the sociological, and the psychological research is abundantly clear. It all says that when we share meaning through rituals, something important happens to us. There's a great amount of research about different important things that happen to us when we share ritual. But the literature is very clear that something happens to us. Theologian, spiritualist, and Franciscan Richard Rohr has said, a redemptive thing we can do for another is listen to understand while being fully present with that person. And when we feel heard, understood, and cared for, it's surprising how our problems seem to fade. If we feel that someone is sharing our burden with us, walking with us, for some remarkable reason, our suffering is diminished. I think in a way, shared ritual does something similar to what Richard Rohr was talking about. When we share a ritual, something happens, and there's something in what happens we feel somehow heard or shared with or companioned in some mysterious way. Those who are in the ritual with us, somehow we feel connected to them. And we don't feel quite so alone, and somehow our suffering is diminished. And so when I looked into the communal mourning traditions of the Jewish faith, I found several understandings of the way we mourn and the way loss affects us that I want to share with you. Again, I want to ask a favor here. There are maybe those among you whose enunciation of Hebrew is far better than mine. And please lend a hand to me after the service, and if I've gummed something up, come and help me out. All right? The first period of mourning understood in the Jewish tradition is Aninut. Aninut is an intense mourning. It follows immediately after finding out about a loss. It is a time when a mourner can focus on nothing else but the loss. And so, during this time, the Jewish faith are excused from communal participation and even excused from religious observances. During Aninut, a mourner is not expected to be okay. And in fact, this first period of mourning lasts until the burial is complete. And in the Jewish tradition, it is understood that those who are mourning are not able to focus on anything but the memorial and burial of their beloved. Interesting that I notice now, reading this tradition, that my family chose not to be able to bury my father because he wanted his body donated to research, and so he is with Temple Medical School for a year after his death. And then we also decided not to hold a memorial until a more convenient time in the fall. Nearly 6 months, actually a little over 6 months from when he died. And now that I read these Mormon traditions and I think about it, I realize that pretty much for 6 months, nobody in my immediate family has been really very effective at doing anything but talking about his memorial. It's all the conversations we've had with each other. It intruded in many places in our lives. And I think there's some truth to this tradition. We just drew it out a lot longer. There may have been some wisdom in understanding that until some sort of ritual provides closure, mourners will continue to struggle. The next period of mourning in the Jewish tradition is called Shiva. And Shiva is the period that follows a burial or memorial. It's the one we, who are not part of the tradition, probably hear about the most well known. And during this time, mourners are treated gently. Their community meets immediate needs. Family and friends bring food to help support the mourners and to help ensure that they do not mourn in isolation. At the end of Shiva, family and friends will sometimes accompany mourners on a brief walk. And what I was reading said even just around the block, right? Or, for example, around the block, to mark their return into a larger world. And this tradition of Shiva also spoke to me. You know, to recognize that you start with this intense mourning, and then you have a ritual. And after the ritual, you're kind of in halfway mourning. You're not fully ready to return to community or continue observances yet. And so you need the help of your community around you. And then at the end of that time, when you're ready, and in Jewish tradition it's calendar-based, but everybody goes out and takes a walk with you to say, okay, look, we're outside together. We're taking a walk together. We must be returning. I think this idea of Shiva is part of what has given me some forgiveness for myself. For the times where in my own grief I have struggled to remain engaged. Because here's a tradition that is thousands of years old that makes very clear, hey, people who are grieving need some space, man. There are two other traditions of Jewish mourning I want to share with you for your reflection. Sheloshim is a recognition that returning to the world from grief is not an on switch. Right? This idea of Sheloshim, it makes clear that you don't just go walk around the block and like, hey, I'm back. That was hard. Glad it's over. And everything just goes fine. Sheloshim is generally expected to last at least 30 days after Shiva and is in place to remind the community that the mourner has not yet fully returned to the world. And they may be around, but they're not yet fully restored. I think Sheloshim is clearly where I have been residing for months since my father's death. And there are times where I feel like I'm okay and ready to be back in the world, and then times when I am surprised to find that I am not. For example, I knew that 9/11 was the date that killed my father. But when 9/11 rolled around this year, I was not prepared for the intense impact the date would have on me. I went through things normally, felt a little odd, a little strange. And then the day after 9/11, I found myself simply unable to function. I got up in the morning and I started getting ready for work, and the next thing I knew, I was crying and sitting on the floor of the bedroom after supper and left for work. And I just really couldn't imagine doing anything else. And so I called in sick because I felt like maybe that wasn't how a chaplain should show up in a patient's room. And it wasn't until halfway through the day when I actually named the phrase 9/11 killed my father, that I began to feel right again. It needed a place, that feeling. It needed a phrase, and it needed a name. Maybe a formal period of recognizing that I was incompletely in the world might have helped me understand that I needed some space. And you know, the Jewish tradition also recognizes, and this is one of those words, Yarsit, so Y-A-H-R-Z-I-T, which is a word for the anniversary of loss, which I guess in my case could be an anniversary connected to the loss, because certainly the date of 9/11 proved to have a similar impact on me. And you know, in the Jewish tradition, even after the formal mourning times, Shiva, Sheloshim, even with the recognition of Yarzit, if they've lost someone close to them, a mourner may say special prayers every day for as long as the entire next year to help ritualize their memory and their feelings towards their loss. Why do you think rituals and structure like this helps us to contain our mourning, our suffering? I want to share a poem with you. It's called The Guest House by Rudy. I'm sure many of you know it. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I often share something of this poem with patients and families when they appear afraid or sad, but seem to be holding that feeling at bay. In the moments following my father's memorial, I had many friends and family gather around. And I remember one of them saying, in talking about health and aging and death and dying, we just need to stay positive. It's all about attention. And so I put my hand up like this while we were talking. I admit I think this is pretty clever. I hope you do too. And I slowly talked about Rumi's poem and shared what few lines I could remember at the time offhand. And I asked the question, what if the feeling knocking at the door of your house isn't a positive feeling? What if it's sorrow, fear, or sadness knocking? How much energy are you spending trying to hold the door closed and hold your feeling at bay? I think mourning ritual makes space like that. It helps us make space for the feelings that need to come in, rather than the ones we wish would come in. And when I left that vigil at Kol Ami, I had shed a tear or two. I had made space for my anger, my sadness, maybe most of all, my feelings of helplessness. And I think I felt a little bit of the way that ritual can change our suffering. And even though I was there to bear witness to the suffering of another community, of work colleagues, of people of faith and hope that I admire, something in me changed personally, and my own insular suffering moved and shifted somehow. And when I walked away, it felt somehow lighter. I guess for me, that happened at a time when I was ready for that shift to happen. And I think here's another important thing for us to understand. And another reason for us to look at mourning traditions like those in Judaism and learn from them. Because the way they tell us to set time and space aside to mourn reminds us that mourning happens when we need, and that coming out of it happens when we are ready. We don't come out of mourning because we think it's time to, but because we wish we would. Come out of mourning because those feelings that needed space found it. Sometimes, given the wisdom learned from Judaism and Rumi, like maybe it's better not to do things the way we want sometimes, but to do things the way we need sometimes. I think too that traditional mourning practices help us to remember that it's okay for someone not to be okay. I have some of my own practices that I have adopted after looking at traditions like this. One of them comes from an old West Country practice around Samhain, or this time of year, of putting plate out for the ancestors. And so this year I got to make my father's favorite bread, Sullivan Street bread from the Sullivan Street Bakery. And I got to set it out with a stew for my father and say a prayer on the dark of night and let him know that he's still welcome to come and visit. And that plate will be left out each year at this time for me. It's one of the practices that helps me to figure out where he is right now. If he's just over there. I started this talk saying I wanted to talk about where we go when we die. I guess I didn't exactly do that, did I? Though I think this theme is interconnected with beliefs about the afterlife. Because maybe those beliefs are a source of comfort to the living in a similar way that the mourning traditions help us share suffering and through that provide some comfort to us. Like I said, in the Jewish tradition, there's not a specific understanding of what happens in the afterlife, not exactly. There's a belief that there must be something, a belief that creation loves us, a belief that we're promised a better world, a world with more justice, more compassion, and love. There's some belief that we will get to be with and be kept with those we love and in community. But the specifics of that are left out in the beyond, wherever it is that we go. And I think about this in this tradition, in this faith, where sometimes our beliefs are a little ambiguous, a little beyond. And I wonder if those deep, rich traditions of mourning have something to show us. I wonder if they make a space for suffering, and in doing so, they help us focus that loss in the mourning. Maybe a definitive answer about the afterlife isn't quite so necessary. All I really know is that, like many of you, my sorrow needs space, or it is always knocking. Whether it's in the connection to the loss of my father, in connection to the way I feel, compassion for someone else experiencing a similar loss, or in connection to the painful and horrible losses that I look at in the public eye. My own sorrow needs some sacred space. And I'm not sure it matters if I find that space through beliefs in the great beyond and beliefs in what happens after here, or if I find that space through practices that I share with others, such as those who are in this community here. I think what matters most is that I find the space, and that I get to share that space. And then I get to experience the transformation that happens when others share my suffering. And so, As you approach this week coming, as you look at this week, I put to you the question of what spaces are you creating? And I put to you the question, too, of what transformation or what may be offered for you in creating those spaces. Will it be easier to re-engage or to find your way back into the world that you want to be in? Will it be easier to hold that faith for that better world where there's justice, more compassion, and love? I don't know the answers to these questions. I'm fortunately a member of the faith where it's okay to just have answers to questions. But I pose them to all of us this morning. Let me say, too, to twist a little bit of humor, perhaps, that I'm going to close by saying that in order to have some communal space and for the week to come, we are going to need the help of those of you among us who are able-bodied to clear some space here after service. We have a different use for the space that we share next Saturday night. And this is the Sunday before we are going to share the space differently next Saturday night. And so any of you that are able to help move chairs and make space and maybe help set up some tables for next week. We have Lori, who knows something of what's going on. I think Marilyn, too, knows something of what's going on. All right. Hopefully there are others among us who do as well, who can lead and guide us in creating some open space. Thank you for this time this morning. I wish all of you depth and reflection in the times to come. Let us enjoy our closing song, Let It Be a Dance. Please rise in body or spirit and open your hymnals to number 311. Please remain standing in body or spirit for the extinguishing of our chalice, closing prayers. And I want to thank you all for singing one of my father's favorite songs in our hymn. Let the light of this chalice sustain us even in the darkest of time. May it carry us forward into this week. May it remind us that our hearts are as one and the light that burns inside of us we all share. So be it. Please enjoy our postlude. You may be seated. Gentle people, go in peace. Please help move some chairs and enjoy some chili.